In this knife talk video, we're talking about the Buck 301 Stockman. And I got this knife because I won a Buck Deuce, 375 Deuce, on blade forums from the username, I believe, is Carboniferous. And it was a nice knife, especially I saw you can get them at Walmart for like either $8 or $10, I think. And, it had nice thin blades, so they cut well. Really small and easy to put in the pocket, even in the watch pocket. So I wanted to get a US made Buck knife because they're kind of a classic, knife manufacturer. Buck, it's been around since a long time. You can see 1902. And they still make a lot of knives in the United States, which is nice. I like GEC knives because they're made in Pennsylvania, and hoping to get some more case knives. I have a couple. They're made in Bradford, Pennsylvania. So I'm not one of those people who only buys US made knives, but I do appreciate it. And I appreciate the kind of heritage or historicity of a company that's been in the United States for a long time. So I wanted to get one of their US made knives. And there's the 301, which is this one, the larger one. It's about 4 inches closed. And then there's the smaller 303, and then I believe the 302 is the solitaire, which is a single blade. The 303 is just a smaller Stockman. But this is a relatively large Stockman knife. Like I said, it's about 4 inches long. It has brass bolsters and pins, which I like. I actually really like brass bolsters and everything. I think it looks good, especially with this wood covers that they use. Makes for a nice looking knife. Now, one thing that's different about this Stockman from others, a lot of Stockman, is that it's a 3-spring Stockman. So rather than being 2 springs, where one of the springs is for the main blade, and then the second spring has both the 2 secondary blades on it, so they're kind of ground thin and placed next to each other. This is a 3-spring knife, so each one of these blades has a spring, and it makes for a thicker knife for a 3-blade Stockman. Now, that's kind of one thing that I knew when I got this knife, but I could overlook, but I'm not a huge fan of it. You can see that if they ground this knife, kind of a distal taper, I think is what it's called, where the actual tang of the blade or the shoulder gets thinner towards the tip, they could definitely fit 3 full-size blades into this frame. Because it is 3 springs, if this blade got thinner towards the tip, you could fit it all the way to somewhere around here probably. And same deal with this, probably about to where the kick or whatever this is called, the tang of the knife comes up. So I really think that if it's going to be a 3-blade, which the reason they make it a 3-blade is because it makes for easier manufacture. When it's a 3-blade Stockman, they basically don't have to grind these 2 blades so that they fit together. They can take up the full width of a spring, so it's less manufacturing precision. So if they're going to do that, I think that it would be nicer if you had 3 full-size blades, which would be unusual. You don't have too many full-size 3-blade knives. So a little bit of wasted space there. But again, not a huge deal, for a relatively inexpensive working knife, not a huge deal. Now, another thing that I'm not a huge fan of is the saber grind. I think that it looks relatively good, and I'm sure it would cut well too, because it's a hollow ground saber grind. So it's going to come to a thin edge, but I think that in general I like a flat grind, a full flat grind, a little better. And that's what it is on all 3 of these blades, is a saber ground hollow grind, as you can see. Now, another thing you're probably seeing there is that these blades do have snap. They do, open up and snap open and snap closed also. I'll show you that on all 3 of the blades. But they're not super strong. They're actually really weak springs. These are some of the weakest springs I've ever felt. Now, the 375 Deuce Buck that I had also had really weak springs, but I thought that it was just because it's a smaller knife. But after reading on this knife a little bit, I think that pretty much all bucks, I think it's part of, you know, how they make the knives, they have really weak springs. So it works, you know, when you open it, it's gonna stay open and stuff. But the spring is really weak. So if you push on it on the back, or if you accidentally like hit it the wrong way, it will close a lot easier than other knives. These don't have half stop, so that's another thing. It's not gonna stop halfway like, you know, some knives do. And the snap closed is not super strong, so not a huge fan of that. But I could also overlook that. As you know, it's not a super expensive knife. I think this was around $40, and you know, it's something that I could overlook as long as it snaps closed and snaps open. But what I can't overlook here, and why I'm going to be sending this knife back, is this proud tip. Now, I actually asked about this on Blade Forums before getting this knife, because I saw a kind of, I think it was a stock picture on Google, just when I did a search for this knife, that seemed, it was from the kind of the top like this, so I couldn't be perfectly sure, but it seemed like the tip of the spey blade was above the frame. So I asked about it, and someone said that theirs wasn't. Mine definitely is. As you can see the edge there, and the tip is above the spring, or I'm sorry, above the frame. So if that person's wasn't, and mine is, and the one I saw in the pictures is, I don't know if this is, you know, a manufacturing defect, as in they're meant to be below the frame and this one just isn't, or if it's how it's designed to be. And if so, I guess it's not a manufacturing defect, but it's not a design feature that I'm okay with. So this is going to be going back for that reason. I haven't carried it or used it or anything. I took it out. I've opened and closed the blades, like including or not including this video, probably once each. And the reason, you know, I talk about proud tips a lot in my videos, and I'm a lot more sensitive about them than a lot of people, I think. But I think that it's just something that you can just design the knife differently. I mean, if they would have made the frame more of a swell on this side, you know, then the tip wouldn't be proud, rather than the swell being on that side. So basically just reverse this frame. You know, if this higher part was over here, you could still access this nail neck. It would actually be easier to access this nail neck, and the tip wouldn't be proud. So it's just, you know, design the knife a little differently. The second thing that I don't like about it is it really can, you know, be a safety issue. If you're, you know, working and your hand slips down, you know, I don't know, because this, you know, knife isn't all that sharp, didn't really come super sharp, and that tip is not very pointy, but, you know, your finger could catch on that and cut a little bit. And, you know, a knife shouldn't be cutting you while it's closed. So it's a little bit of a safety issue also. And, you know, I've gotten lots of knives with close to or proud tips, and often I'll, you know, grind the kick down. But I'm not going to do this on this knife for really one main reason. First of all, I just think that it's a poorly designed, you know, blade. I think that there's no reason it should be above the frame there, and, you know, could just change the design a little bit. But secondly, if you see here, this nail nick is pretty close to being below the frame. In fact, part of it is. Now you could drop it a little bit, but I actually don't know if you could drop the kick on this blade enough that this tip would be, you know, safely below the handle, enough that you could sharpen it a couple times without it coming back up above the handle, and still be able to easily access this nail nick. So, you know, for that reason, because this tip is proud, I'm going to be sending it back. And I hate to do it. I would really like to have a USA made buck, and I think what I'll do is I will get the 302, I believe it is, the solitaire, which is basically this frame with just this blade. So it's going to be a lot thinner. It's going to have 2 less springs. It's just going to have this this main clip point, and, you know, I hope that it has a little bit stronger of a spring than this one does. I doubt it, because, like I say, I think it's part of how they manufacture them, part of the design or engineering, but hopefully it does have a little bit stronger spring. But we'll see, and, you know, of course I'll do a 1-minute overview and possibly a knife talk video on that knife when I get it, if I get it. But, you know, like I say, I really wish that I could like this knife. I'd like to have a Stockman from Buck, because I have one from Great Eastern Cutlery, and, you know, I'd like to have them to compare to. I think it's a really classic pattern because it's such a, utilitarian pattern. But, I just, it just doesn't work for me that this tip is proud of the frame, and I don't think that you could drop it enough for it to be viable. And I think that it is, rather than a manufacturing problem, I think it's a design problem. Again, I think a lot of people don't care about that, but something that I am particular about. So that's my thoughts on this buck knife. Now again, I think it's a good looking knife. I like the brass hardware with the wood handle. I don't know if this shield is pinned or glued, but it looks fine. The blue background, kind of fits in with the color theme. And also another thing I wanted to mention about this knife is if this was actually a manufacturing defect, I could send it in. That's something you hear about Buck all the time, is that they have a really great warranty and great service. And you hear all kinds of stories about that. So I've never used Buck's warranty or service, but it's one that I tend to believe the hype or the the reputation that it has. Because you hear so many good stories. So if this was something where like maybe they didn't grind the kick enough or something, and it could be fixed because it was a manufacturing defect, I would send it in. But I think that it's just a design thing, and they won't be able to get that tip below the frame without, again, like I said, making this nail neck too difficult to get to. So it's going to go back, and hopefully I'll be able to enjoy the next USA made buck that I get. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, I always enjoy to see what you guys have to say, what you all have to say. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, so leave them below. And if you would like to get notifications for when I do post, the 1 minute overview on the other buck that I'll have, if I get it, or any other knives, I've got lots of 1 minute overviews and knife talk videos coming up. Don't forget to subscribe, because like I say, then you get notifications, and you can go ahead and look at my other playlists, my 1 minute overview playlist and knife talk video playlist. They have lots of other videos, so check those out, and don't forget to go out and do good.